television, only to find himself face-to-face with one of the most controversial co-hosts in talk show history. What you're about to witness is the moment Steve Harvey's appearance on The View turned from friendly banter into an all-out verbal warfare that left producers scrambling, audience members gasping, and one comedy legend storming off. Set in what can only be described as the most explosive daytime television moment of the year. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me which daytime talk show host you think would win in a debate. Trust me, after you see what Joy Behar did to Steve Harvey, you'll have some strong opinions. It was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. Steve Harvey, riding high on the success of his multiple television ventures, had agreed to appear on The View to discuss his latest book about relationships and his upcoming comedy special. The morning started like any other at the ABC studios in New York. Steve arrived early, his usual charismatic self, greeting production assistants and makeup artists with his trademark humor and warmth. The show's producers had briefed the co-hosts about keeping the conversation light and entertaining. Steve was there to promote his projects, share some laughs, and maybe offer some of his famous relationship advice. What nobody anticipated was that Joy Behar had apparently woken up on the wrong side of the bed that morning, armed with a chip on her shoulder and a determination to turn what should have been a fun interview into her personal platform for confrontation. As Steve settled into the guest chair, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit and flashing that million-dollar smile that had made him a household name, the energy in the studio felt normal. Whoopi Goldberg, serving as moderator that day, had just finished the opening segment and was preparing to introduce their guest. The audience was buzzing with excitement, many of them longtime fans of Steve's various shows. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the king of family television himself, Steve Harvey," Whoopi announced with genuine warmth. Steve walked out to thunderous applause, working the crowd like the seasoned entertainer he was. He hugged each of the co-hosts, saving Joy for last. Even in that brief embrace, there was something in Joy's demeanor that seemed off, a stiffness that Steve noticed but chose to ignore, chalking it up to pre-show jitters. "Steve Harvey, welcome back to The View," Whoopi began once everyone was seated. "You've got so much going on. The book, the comedy special, Family Feud, is still killing it in the ratings. How do you manage to juggle all of this?" Steve leaned back comfortably, his natural showmanship taking over. "You know, Whoopi, I've been blessed. When you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. Whether I'm helping families win money on Family Feud or trying to help folks navigate their relationships, it's all about connecting with people and hopefully making them laugh along the way." The conversation flowed naturally for the first few minutes. Steve shared funny behind-the-scenes stories from Family Feud, talked about his upcoming comedy tour, and even offered some relationship advice that had the audience laughing and applauding. Everything was going exactly as planned until Joy Behar decided to redirect the conversation. "Steve, I have to ask you about something," Joy interrupted, her tone noticeably sharper than the collegial atmosphere that had been established. "You've made a career out of giving relationship advice, but you've been married 3 times yourself. Don't you think that's a little hypocritical?" And the studio fell silent. You could feel the energy shift immediately. Steve's smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. But the damage was done. The friendly interview had just taken a hostile turn, and everyone in the studio could sense it. "Well, Joy," Steve responded, maintaining his composure but with a slight edge creeping into his voice, "I think my experiences, both good and bad, actually qualify me to help other people. I've learned from my mistakes, and that's exactly what makes my advice valuable. I'm not claiming to be perfect, I'm claiming to be experienced." Joy wasn't backing down. "But don't you think it's convenient that you can profit off of relationship advice while your own personal life has been, let's say, complicated? I mean, 3 marriages, Steve. That's not exactly a track record that screams relationship expert." The other co-hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the direction any of them had expected the interview to take, and you could see them trying to figure out how to steer the conversation back to safer territory. Steve's jaw tightened slightly, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "Joy, I think you're missing the point here. I don't hide my past. I'm open about my journey because that's what makes my advice real. I'm not some theoretical relationship guru sitting in an ivory tower. I'm a man who has lived through the ups and downs of love and marriage, and I use those experiences to help other people avoid the same pitfalls. But doesn't that make you more of a cautionary tale than an advice giver? Joy pressed, clearly enjoying the discomfort she was creating. I mean, if I wanted relationship advice, I'd probably go to someone who got it right the first time, not someone who's had to keep trying until something stuck. The audience was growing restless. This wasn't the fun, entertaining segment they had come to see. Steve Harvey was supposed to make them laugh and feel good, not defend his personal life against what was beginning to feel like a very personal attack. Steve leaned forward, his voice remaining calm but with an unmistakable firmness. Joy, I think what you're doing right now is exactly the kind of negativity that destroys relationships. You're taking someone's honesty and vulnerability and trying to use it as a weapon against them. That's not journalism, that's just mean-spirited. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Joy's eyes flashed with something that looked almost like satisfaction at having gotten under Steve's skin. Instead of backing down or acknowledging that perhaps she had crossed a line, she doubled down on her attack. Mean-spirited? Joy laughed, but there was no humor in it. Steve, I'm asking legitimate questions that I think our viewers deserve answers to. You put yourself out there as this relationship guru. You charge people money for advice. You write books telling people how to find and keep love. I think it's fair to examine your qualifications, don't you? Steve's composure was starting to crack, though he was still fighting to maintain his professionalism. My qualifications are my life experiences, both the successes and the failures. But what I'm hearing from you isn't journalism, Joy. What I'm hearing is someone who seems to take pleasure in tearing other people down. Oh, please, Joy scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Don't try to make me the villain here because I'm asking you tough questions. This is what we do on this show. We don't just sit here and let our guests give us their rehearsed talking points. Whoopi tried to intervene, sensing that things were spiraling out of control. Maybe we can talk about Steve's comedy special, which I understand is really funny, But Joy cut her off. No, Whoopi. I think this is important. Steve here has built an empire on telling people how to live their lives, and I think our audience has a right to know whether they should be taking advice from someone who clearly struggled with the very thing he's now selling. Steve's hands were clenched in his lap now, his knuckles white with tension. His voice, when he spoke, was measured but clearly strained. Joy, let me ask you something. How many relationships have you been in? How many times have you given advice to friends about their love lives? Because if we're going to judge people's qualifications based on their personal history, maybe we should examine everyone's track record. This isn't about me. Joy shot back quickly, clearly not liking having the spotlight turned on her. I'm not the one selling relationship advice to millions of people. No, you're just the one sitting here trying to destroy someone's reputation on national television, Steve replied, his voice rising slightly. And for what? What's the point of this, Joy? What are you trying to accomplish here? The other co-hosts were looking increasingly uncomfortable. You could see them trying to catch the attention of producers off camera, hoping someone would step in and redirect this train wreck of an interview. The audience was shifting in their seats, some looking angry at Joy's treatment of their beloved Steve Harvey, others just uncomfortable with the hostile atmosphere that had taken over the show. Joy leaned forward, her voice taking on an even more aggressive tone. What I'm trying to accomplish is honest journalism, Steve. Something that seems to be in short supply these days when it comes to celebrity interviews. Everyone just wants to blow sunshine and ask softball questions. Honest journalism? Steve repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. Is that what you call this? Because what this looks like to me is someone who's bitter about something taking their frustrations out on a guest who came here in good faith to have a conversation. The word bitter hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Joy's face flushed red, and for a moment, the studio was completely silent except for the hum of the cameras. Bitter? Joy's voice was dangerously quiet. Did you just call me bitter? Steve realized he had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he decided to lean into it. If the shoe fits, Joy, you've been attacking me from the moment this conversation started, and for what? Because I've been married more than once? Because I've made mistakes in my personal life? What's really going on here? Joy's composure completely shattered. You want to know what's going on here? What's going on here is that I'm tired of men like you profiting off of women's insecurities while your own lives are a mess. You sell these books telling women how to think like a man, how to act like a lady, all this garbage that reduces women to some kind of formula for landing a husband. Now wait just a minute, Steve said, his voice rising to match hers. Don't you dare misrepresent what I do. I help people, Joy. I help families. I give people hope and laughter and, yes, sometimes advice based on my own experiences. What do you do? What's your contribution to the world besides sitting here tearing people down? The studio erupted. Some audience members were applauding Steve, others were booing Joy, and the whole thing was descending into chaos. Producers were frantically gesturing from off-camera, trying to signal the host to regain control of the situation. My contribution? Joy stood up from her chair, her voice shaking with rage. My contribution is calling out phonies like you, who prey on people's vulnerabilities for profit. You're nothing but a snake oil salesman in a nice suit, Steve Harvey. Steve stood up as well, towering over Joy. And you're nothing but a bitter woman who can't stand to see other people succeed. This whole attack has nothing to do with journalism, and everything to do with whatever personal issues you're dealing with. Personal issues? Joy shrieked. How dare you psychoanalyze me on my own show? Your show? Steve laughed harshly. Last time I checked, this was called The View, not The Joy Behar Show. But I guess that's part of the problem, isn't it? You think everything revolves around you and your opinions. Whoopi was frantically trying to restore order. Okay, let's everybody just take a breath here and... But Joy wasn't done. You know what, Steve? You want to talk about personal issues? Let's talk about how you treat your staff. Let's talk about the stories I've heard about what goes on behind the scenes of your shows. Let's talk about how the man who preaches about treating people with respect actually behaves when the cameras aren't rolling. Steve's face went white, then red with anger. What did you just say? You heard me, Joy said, her voice dripping with venom. Maybe our viewers would be interested to know about the real Steve Harvey, not the sanitized version you present on television. The studio fell completely silent. Whatever Joy was implying, it was clear she had just escalated this conflict to a whole new level. Steve's hands were shaking with rage, and for a moment, it looked like he might actually lose control completely. Steve's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely controlled fury. Joy, I don't know what sick game you think you're playing here, but you better be very careful about the accusations you're making. You want to attack my personal life, fine. You want to question my qualifications, that's your right. But if you're going to sit there and make implications about how I treat people without any evidence, without any facts, then you're not a journalist. You're just a liar. Joy's eyes blazed with defiance. A liar? Oh, that's rich coming from someone whose entire career is built on pretending to be something he's not. Saint Steve, the family man, the relationship expert, the moral authority. Give me a break. I never claimed to be a saint, Steve shot back, his voice echoing through the studio. I've always been honest about my flaws, my mistakes, my journey. But what you're doing right now, this personal vendetta disguised as journalism, this is exactly what's wrong with media today. You're more interested in destroying people than informing your audience. The other co-hosts had given up trying to mediate. They sat in stunned silence as two television veterans tore each other apart on live television. The audience was divided, some cheering for Steve, others supporting Joy, but everyone transfixed by the spectacular meltdown happening before their eyes. Joy laughed bitterly. Personal vendetta? Steve, I don't know you well enough to have a personal vendetta. What I have is a professional obligation to ask the hard questions that other people won't ask. Professional obligation? Steve's voice cracked with incredulity. Joy, there's nothing professional about this. This is personal, and we both know it. The question is, what did I ever do to you to deserve this kind of treatment? For the first time since the interview began, Joy seemed to hesitate. Something flickered across her face, a moment of uncertainty, but she quickly masked it with renewed aggression. You didn't do anything to me personally, Steve. But you represent something that I find deeply troubling. You represent this idea that anyone can become an expert on anything just by getting famous enough. And you represent something that I find even more troubling, Steve fired back without missing a beat. You represent this culture of tearing people down instead of building them up. You represent this idea that being negative and destructive somehow makes you smart or insightful. The tension in the studio was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented breakdown in television decorum. Production assistants stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this train wreck continue. Joy stood up straighter, her voice rising to match the intensity of the moment. You know what, Steve? I think our viewers can see exactly who you really are right now. All that charm, all that folksy wisdom, it all disappears the moment someone challenges you, doesn't it? The real Steve Harvey is standing right here, angry and defensive, and attacking a woman on television. Steve's jaw dropped. Attacking a woman? Are you serious right now? Joy, you've been attacking me from the moment I sat down. You've questioned my character, my integrity, my qualifications, and now you're trying to make yourself the victim? That's unbelievable. I'm not making myself the victim, Joy snapped. I'm pointing out that the man who writes books about how men should treat women is standing here yelling at a woman on national television. I'm yelling at a person who's been attacking me for 20 minutes, Steve corrected, his voice booming through the studio. Your gender has nothing to do with this, Joy. This is about you being unprofessional, disrespectful, and frankly, cruel for no reason whatsoever. Whoopi finally found her voice, though it was shaky. Okay, both of you need to step back and... But Steve was done listening. He turned to face the audience directly, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here today to talk about my book, my comedy, to hopefully make you laugh and maybe share some wisdom from my journey. What I found instead was someone who seems more interested in character assassination than conversation. Joy wasn't finished either. What you found was someone willing to ask the questions that need to be asked instead of just giving you a platform to sell your products. Steve turned back to Joy, his voice now deadly calm. You know what, Joy? You're right about one thing. This conversation has been very revealing. It's shown me exactly who you are as a person, and it's shown our audience exactly what kind of environment you create on this show. I feel sorry for your co-hosts who have to deal with this kind of hostility every day. The words hit Joy like a physical blow. Her face flushed an even deeper red, and for a moment, she seemed speechless. When she finally found her voice, it was shaking with rage. How dare you come on my show and insult me and my co-hosts? I didn't insult your co-hosts, Steve replied evenly. I said I feel sorry for them. There's a difference. And as for insulting you, Joy, I haven't said anything that you haven't proven with your own behavior over the past 20 minutes. The studio fell silent again. The weight of Steve's words hung in the air, and you could see Joy processing what had just happened. She had pushed and pushed, trying to provoke Steve into losing his temper, and now that she had succeeded, she seemed unsure of what to do next. Steve looked around the studio one more time, his gaze taking in the uncomfortable faces of the other hosts, the divided audience, and finally settling back on Joy. You know what? I think I'm done here. This isn't the kind of conversation I came here to have, and frankly, it's not the kind of television that serves anyone. With that, Steve Harvey began to remove his microphone. The action sent shockwaves through the studio. Guests didn't just walk off the view. This wasn't something that happened on daytime television. Joy seemed to realize that she had pushed things too far. Steve, wait, you don't have to. But Steve held up his hand to stop her. No, Joy, I do have to. I have to maintain my dignity and my principles, even when others choose not to. I wish you and your viewers all the best, but I won't be a part of whatever this was supposed to be. As Steve stood up and began walking toward the exit, the studio erupted into chaos. Some audience members were on their feet applauding him, others were booing Joy, and the remaining co-hosts sat in stunned silence, unsure of how to handle this unprecedented situation. Steve paused at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. To everyone watching at home, I want you to remember something. Life is too short to spend it tearing each other down. We should be building each other up, supporting each other, helping each other grow. That's what real wisdom looks like. And with those words, Steve Harvey walked off The View.